My mother works in an office and stories like this aren't just hype. They're reality that people experience every day. The story is based on real experiences so that you can recognize yourself in it and avoid repeating other people's mistakes. All names, addresses, and companies are fictional, of course, but the feelings are real.
The second I saw Valerie's heels clicking down the hallway, fast, erratic, like someone sprinting in stilettos, I knew something was off. She had that look, the one corporate people get right before they try to bury someone alive with a smile. I was mid-bite in my leftover pad thai, watching shipment compliance logs run on my secondary monitor, when the door burst open so hard it knocked my diploma off the wall. Valerie didn't knock. She didn't even look at me. She walked in like it was a crime scene, flanked by two guys from compliance I'd only seen in quarterly Zoom audits. "Check every corner," she snapped. "She's hiding it in here." My mouth was still full of noodles when the shorter guy started opening my filing cabinet. I wiped my fingers on a napkin, stood up, and said, "Excuse me, what exactly are you looking for?" Valerie didn't even blink. "We've received concerns about proprietary code, unauthorized client exports, possible misconduct." She motioned to the tall one. "Start with the drawers. Look for external drives, notebooks, anything." That's when it hit me. This wasn't an audit. This was a takedown, on my lunch break no less. And the best part? My webcam was still running. I'd set it up as a precaution months ago, wired straight into my cloud archive. Just in case something like this ever happened, it was now happening. Before I go on, if you're listening and haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. It helps us keep telling these stories and lets the team know we're not screaming into the void. Hit like, hit subscribe, and let's keep going, because this is just getting started. See, what Valerie didn't know, what most people didn't know, was that I wasn't just some risk analyst. I was the system. Every bonded port submission, every intermodal chain of custody certification, every HTS code override. They ran through workflows I designed and secured. I didn't talk about it in town halls. I didn't present slides. I didn't do fake birthdays or sign the break room card. But I made sure this company never got fined, never got flagged, never triggered a customs hold. I'd been doing it for 9 years. Before Valerie, before her boss. Hell, before we even had an HR department with matching polos and buzzwords like synergy escalation. Back when Belhaven was still operating out of an ugly cinder block building near Tempe with a rattling AC unit and 2 routers duct taped to a ceiling tile. I started as a contractor. They asked me to help clean up a failed audit backlog. I stayed on, year after year, promotion by quiet necessity. No drama, just results. And that's why I let her take credit for the federal pre-clearance audit last fall. She needed the win. I needed the silence. Valerie didn't know the first thing about export control language or supplemental clearance codes. She thought the FROB checkbox meant front of boat. But I didn't correct her. I just filed the paperwork. Fixed the outdated interface she said was clunky. Made sure every deployment log matched the timestamp down to the second. Because I knew. I knew people like her always show their hand. And when they do, you don't scream. You don't argue. You document. So when Valerie handed me that cup of lukewarm coffee 3 weeks before the renewal and said, "We're streamlining. Think automation," I didn't flinch. I didn't even sip it. I looked her dead in the eye and asked, "You planning on replacing me?" She did that fake laugh, the one where the lips move but the eyes stay flat. "Not if you stay useful." Useful, like a paperclip, like a plunger. That night, I opened the private project vault I'd mirrored 6 months earlier. Every trade authorization, every module credential, every deployment log with my name, IP, and timestamp. I backed them up, again, across 3 locations, labeled everything in triplicate. Then I opened my employment contract. Section 14B, paragraph 3. In the event of an unwarranted search, privacy breach, or false misconduct accusation, documented and verifiable, Belhaven Logistics shall issue full exit compensation, including all pending equity, 6 months' salary, and non-compete buyout within 30 business days. No contest. No arbitration. Binding. I printed that page. Highlighted it. Put it in a fireproof pouch with a notarized copy of my deployment approvals. Tucked it into my bottom drawer. Because I don't fight in boardrooms. I build proof. And wait. 3 weeks before the audit that kept this entire company out of a federal penalty cage, Valerie came knocking with one of those pretend gestures that smells like pity before you even lift the lid. A lukewarm coffee, cream swirling like an oil slick, the kind of cup that says, "We already made the decision, but here's something to keep your hands busy while I smile through it." She placed it on my desk like a funeral flower, then leaned against the door frame like she owned the oxygen in the room. "After this review," she said, "we're streamlining roles." Streamlining. That was the new buzzword. Not downsizing, not layoffs. Just streamlining. Nice and sterile like the bloodless version of a back alley mugging. "Think automation. Fewer middle layers," she added, trying to sound visionary and corporate all at once. I didn't respond. Didn't twitch. I just stared at her over the rim of the cursed coffee. That's when she said it, the line that confirmed exactly what I'd already suspected. "Not if you stay useful." Useful. God, that word. I've heard it before, in other jobs. From other people who wore expensive shoes and thought charisma was the same thing as competence. Useful isn't a compliment. It's a leash, a warning, a pretext for disposal. I nodded. Maybe once. Let her feel smug about whatever middle management script she thought she'd nailed. And the second she walked out, I hit the switch. Not literally, but close. I logged into the vault. Not the public one where everyone dumps draft templates and botched meeting notes. No, I'm talking about the internal project vault. The one I built and kept mirrored in private cloud storage under a mirrored key path Valerie didn't even know existed. Every trade license authorization, logged, time-stamped, digitally signed, every module credential I'd ever deployed for customs clearance, tagged and hashed, every update to the export validation system, especially the ones I made without her knowledge to fix the patches her innovation consultant broke, documented, encrypted, and saved in 3 separate backups across 2 cloud providers and 1 encrypted external drive I kept off-site. I'd been doing it quietly for months. Not because I was paranoid, but because I was prepared. Valerie's corporate theater didn't scare me. What scared me was letting someone like her rewrite my legacy into a spreadsheet labeled excess FTE. So I dug out my employment contract. It wasn't the version legal had online. Mine was the notarized original, countersigned wet ink, stamped by the chief operating officer, back when the company still believed in people over process. I flipped to the clause I'd insisted on 3 years earlier when they begged me to stay after the Fort Worth incident nearly cost us our bonded carrier status. Section 14B, paragraph 3, read like gospel. In the event of an unwarranted investigation, breach of employee privacy, or false accusation of professional misconduct, if proven via documented evidence, Belhaven Logistics shall issue immediate full payout of pending equity, accumulated bonus, and non-compete offset within 30 business days. No internal arbitration. No board appeal. Binding. That clause cost them nothing to add, at the time. But now? Now it was a loaded gun sitting politely in a drawer. I highlighted the paragraph. Made 3 copies. Stored one in the pouch with my deployment keys, one in the backup envelope I kept at home, and the last? That one went into a laminated sleeve marked, "If found, return to sender." I didn't tell anyone. Didn't change my tone. Didn't change my schedule. I still showed up at 7:45 every morning, still ate my sandwich in the courtyard, still answered Valerie's emails with the exact amount of fake enthusiasm HR would call team-oriented. But everything was already moving. I was winding the spring, because the only thing more dangerous than being underestimated is being prepared when it happens. The export validation system went live Monday morning at exactly 6:03 a.m., right on schedule. Seamless. 0 errors. Every module I'd been updating behind the scenes, every time-stamped rule, every custom clearance protocol, every data bridge between our systems and CBP functioned like clockwork. No fireworks, no launch party, just quiet perfection humming through the pipes of a company that didn't realize it still ran on my code. I didn't wait to see who'd take credit this time. By 6:15, I'd already confirmed system integrity and logged the proof, 1 master deployment log, digitally signed and triply backed up. By 6:50, I had printed my offboarding memo, 5 pages, clear, clinical, complete. It detailed every completed validation cycle, each module now live, and a brief summary of residual oversight tasks, most of which, frankly, I no longer gave a damn about. I put the memo in a plain folder. No logo, no signature flourish, just a single sticky note on the front. Valerie. At 7:08, I walked into the office like it was any other day, said morning to reception, logged in, ran my usual diagnostic cycle just for appearances. Then, with zero drama, zero announcement, and zero appetite for the theatrical exits, I walked into Valerie's glass-walled office and laid the folder dead center on her keyboard. She wasn't in yet. Of course she wasn't. She never showed up before 8:30, unless there was a camera crew or some executive brunch on the schedule. I looked around her office, those ridiculous motivational posters, that standing desk she never used, the female exec powered by wine and strategy mug she thought made her relatable. None of it mattered. The trap had already been set, and she wouldn't even know it until she stepped in it barefoot. I walked back to my office, opened my personal drawer, pulled the fireproof pouch, still sealed. Inside, my notarized contract, printouts of the vault logs, and a USB drive with final backups that could survive a nuclear winter. Then I logged out. No farewell email, no Slack goodbye gif, no awkward cake in the break room with "Good luck, Lisa" spelled wrong. Because this wasn't goodbye. This was the next move in a quiet war she never knew she started. Before I left, I slid one final page into the folder on her desk, tucked between the list of validation completions and the memo's closing line. It wasn't long, just 10 words, in bold Arial, printed in the center of the page. Review Section 14B. I didn't leave a phone number. I didn't leave forwarding instructions. I didn't even take the last Diet Coke from the office fridge. I just walked out. Valerie had no idea that I'd been quietly documenting every misstep, every unlogged override, every little moment she tried to flex authority she never earned. She didn't know about the deployment log backups or the silent clause she triggered the second she tried to sniff around my credentials. But she'd learn. And when she did, she wouldn't be able to argue, panic, or pivot. Because I didn't just leave the company. I left the noose, and she'd already slipped her head through it. It was a Wednesday, the kind of dry, slow-moving Arizona day where the air tastes like sunburn and the HVAC hums louder than your own thoughts. I was at home, finally catching my breath, reheating some leftover enchiladas and watching trashy courtroom TV when my phone buzzed with a ping from the security feed I'd forgotten I even set up. Motion detected. Office cam Aura 1. At first, I thought it was just building maintenance or maybe someone from IT grabbing my monitor. But then the feed loaded. Valerie, storming into my office like it was a crime scene and she was the sheriff, priest, and executioner all rolled into one. She wasn't alone either. Behind her were 2 guys in navy suits, the kind of guys who looked allergic to direct eye contact and good coffee. Legal, compliance, probably someone she'd sweet-talked into this last-ditch little drama. They didn't knock. They didn't even pause. "Check every corner," she barked, already rolling up her sleeves like she was about to climb into the ceiling vents herself. "She's hiding something. Proprietary code, unauthorized logs, anything. Don't miss a single drawer." The short one looked unsure. The taller one pulled out his phone, probably to record. Because even the dumb ones know Valerie doesn't start a war without at least pretending it's a policy meeting. And then they started tearing the place apart. Binders were flipped, folders pulled, sticky notes photographed. My damn lunch receipt from 2 weeks ago got a full 5 seconds of scrutiny, like I'd smuggled out nuclear launch codes in between line items for diet soda and extra salsa. And the best part? They didn't know. They didn't know the webcam I mounted on the back corner of my second monitor, painted black, silent, unblinking, was still active. Still hardwired to a cloud account not tied to my name. Still recording. Every second. Every word. They had no clue they were walking straight into a legal bear trap with clown shoes on. You could see it on Valerie's face, this smug, twitchy confidence. Like she thought the moment I left, the whole infrastructure would collapse and she'd be the heroine who cleaned up the mess. What she didn't count on was that the mess wasn't mine. They found nothing. Because of course they did. No client data, no rogue USB drives, no incriminating printouts tucked under the keyboard. I'd already pulled everything. Every credential, every log, every last breadcrumb was gone. Because I followed protocol. Hell, I wrote the protocol, but that didn't stop them. She yanked open drawers like a toddler looking for candy, muttering to herself about cover-ups and unauthorized modules. At one point, she held up an old phone charger like it was a smoking gun. "You think she used this to export?" she asked the compliance guy, who just blinked like he wanted to go home. They were flailing, and it was all on tape. When the tall one finally asked, "Did she authorize this search?" You could actually see Valerie freeze for a half second. Just enough time for her brain to realize what she'd done. "No, but we're in a gray area here," she stammered. "She's already left the company. That means her workspace is technically unprotected." Wrong. Section 14B didn't care if I was still on payroll or if I'd handed in my stapler. It was airtight, ironclad, triggered not by suspicion, but by action. An unwarranted search with no documented probable cause was grounds for full payout. Immediate, binding, and if it was recorded? Well, that's what we call a career ender. They didn't know they were being watched, but they were. And the second Valerie opened that bottom drawer, yeah, the one with the fireproof pouch, I swear to God, her entire soul left her body for a moment. I paused the feed right there and smiled. I was still barefoot when she found it, still standing in my tiny kitchen, half distracted by a burnt tortilla on the stovetop when the feed lit up with motion again. The camera had a wide enough angle to catch Valerie's face just before she leaned into the bottom drawer. My bottom drawer, and yanked with the kind of force people use when they think they're about to prove something big, something scandalous. What she pulled out instead was the fireproof pouch, black, heavy, labeled with nothing but a red sticker that said confidential. I watched her pause, like a part of her knew she was already too deep in the wrong room at the wrong time, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. She unzipped it. No hesitation, no gloves, no witnesses. Or so she thought. She pulled out the contents like she was on some true crime special, like the pouch might contain an international smuggling blueprint instead of what it actually held. My notarized employment contract, a sealed USB drive with full deployment logs, and a signed memo from our CTO dated 6 months prior, approving private redundancy backups for emergency validation deployment. Employee L. Monroe. I'd printed it on the same paper stock legal used for executive contracts. She held it like it burned her fingers. It wasn't shock. It was realization. She hadn't found a trap. She'd tripped one. The short compliance guy tilted his head like a confused dog. "What is that?" Valerie didn't answer. She flipped through the pages faster now, trying to reframe what she was seeing, hoping, maybe, that one of the documents would be forged or missing a signature. But they weren't. Everything was neat, dated, indexed, counter-initialed where required. I'm pretty sure this wasn't here before," she said, but even her tone had started to crack. The tall one stepped closer and asked it, the question that should have been asked 20 minutes earlier. "Did she authorize this search?" Valerie's eyes flicked toward the door like she could somehow reverse time by walking out of the room. "She left the company. This is a company office. We don't need authorization." You could almost hear the floor drop out from under her. "Not entirely true," the short one muttered, "depending on clause language, especially if there's a privacy or retaliation element." And just like that, I watched it hit him. They knew. Not everything, not yet, but enough to realize they had just taken part in a pretty flagrant violation of internal privacy protocol. And this wasn't just HR turf. This was contract law, federal compliance, real stakes. Valerie was still holding the contract page when her hands started shaking. The top of the document was highlighted. The clause. The damn clause. Section 14B, paragraph 3. The one I'd highlighted in blue ink. The one that specifically stated that any unwarranted search or false misconduct investigation conducted without employee consent or documented probable cause shall result in immediate disbursal of equity holdings, exit bonuses, and severance compensation. The same clause her grubby little fingers had just activated. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the feed roll. Valerie mumbled something incoherent, shuffled the papers like maybe she could shove them back in the pouch and pretend the whole thing hadn't just happened. The tall one spoke again, this time with less uncertainty. "I think we're done here." She didn't argue. She didn't say a word. just clutched the folder like it might bite her, and walked out of my office with her shadow crawling behind her like guilt on a leash. I leaned back, clicked download on the footage, and labeled it Violation Valerie R. Final.mp4. Then I opened a new message to my attorney. No need for dramatics, no need for commentary. Just 4 words. She triggered the clause. The email went out at exactly 7:02 a.m. the next morning. My attorney doesn't drink coffee, doesn't believe in emojis, and never uses exclamation marks. But he does believe in airtight documentation and digital timestamps, and that email was surgical. Subject line: Notice of net clause activation. 14B, employee L. Monroe. No fluff, no let-in. Just 3 clean attachments. A high-definition video file labeled Unwarranted Search. 12:31 p.m. Office 214. A PDF of my system deployment logs, signed and hash matched to the final module push at 6:03 a.m. A scanned excerpt of my employment contract, Section 14B, highlighted in sky blue, with countersignatures from legal and the COO dated 2 years back 3 files. That's all it took. By 8:30, HR's auto-reply system had glitched under the internal chatter. I know this because a former coworker texted me, "Girl, what did you do?" HR is in full freak-out mode. Valerie's locked in a conference room with someone from legal, and Susan looks like she saw a ghost. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the original contract on my desktop and read through Clause 14B again, just to let it sink in that this moment wasn't a lucky break. It was designed, written, secured. The clause didn't leave room for interpretation. No wiggle, no PR dance. If any employee is subjected to an unwarranted or defamatory investigation, including unauthorized access to personal or professional property, and the claim is substantiated by recorded evidence, Belhaven Logistics shall immediately and without delay issue full equity disbursement, exit compensation, and 6-month non-compete offset. Binding, non-negotiable, no internal arbitration required. That last sentence always made me smile. No internal arbitration required. Because that was Valerie's whole game. She loved the game of spinning everything into HR limbo, stringing out issues for months until the whistleblowers gave up. Or the story got buried in company jargon and forgotten birthdays. But not this time. She couldn't bury the footage, couldn't undo her voice on tape. Couldn't explain away the CTO's signed memo buried in the pouch she opened with her hands without a single documented reason. By 10:15 a.m., I had a soft ping from my bank. The wire transfer hadn't landed yet, but a pending verification code had been requested. That meant someone had triggered the mechanism. They were doing it, quietly, begrudgingly, but they were doing it. Because the cost of paying me out was now cheaper than the cost of not doing it. They'd run the risk matrix. They'd calculated the PR risk of a federal compliance employee leaking proof of internal retaliation tied to a contract breach. And they blinked. My attorney called me later that afternoon, said the words I'd already guessed were coming. They're not contesting the claim. No dispute filed, just a reply from HR asking where to send the funds. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the blank space on my wall where my old company award used to hang, and just let myself feel it. Not joy, not pride, something colder, cleaner, like I'd put down a scalpel after the last cut in a long, precise surgery. No applause, no high fives, just closure. They triggered the clause, and now they had to live with it. I waited 24 hours. Gave them the grace they didn't deserve. No demands, no threats. Just one email, bulletproof and clean. Per Section 14B, this constitutes breach of privacy and professional defamation. Please confirm wire instructions by close of business. Sent it at 8:01 a.m. with read receipt enabled. Watch the little check mark turn green 27 minutes later. Then, silence. No reply. No confirmation. Not even a form letter stall tactic from HR. Just dead air. The kind of silence you only hear in boardrooms when someone says the word lawsuit out loud and suddenly nobody knows where the stapler is. So I waited. Then, at 2:43 p.m., my phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it ring once, then twice, then answered like I was picking up a call about dry cleaning. Lisa Monroe speaking. A pause. Then a voice that always sounded like it belonged to a real estate seminar in hell. Hi, Lisa. It's Susan McAllister. I'm calling from HR. She always introduced herself like I might have forgotten her, like she wasn't the one who once cried on my shoulder during her divorce, then turned around and docked my PTO for being 5 minutes late the next month. "We've reviewed the material you sent," she said, careful, rehearsed, like she was walking through a room full of glass. "And, while we don't agree with all the characterizations, we do recognize that some procedural lapses may have occurred." I didn't say anything. She kept going. "We'd like to avoid escalation. Perhaps we can come to an understanding." I almost laughed. An understanding? Now they wanted understanding? I took a breath, made sure my tone didn't spike, didn't dip, just stayed flat, calm, surgical. "My understanding," I said, "is written in your standard contract template, section 14B, the version signed by your legal team and counter-initialed by your COO. Susan exhaled, like someone trying not to get emotional in front of a firing squad. "You're sure you want to handle it this way?" she asked. "We could explore alternative solutions that don't involve..." "Don't involve what?" I said, cutting her off so clean she didn't even flinch. "Evidence? Documentation? Binding clauses that your own department approved?" Silence. Then I said it, calm as winter. "I'm not negotiating, Susan. I'm collecting." Click. No profanity, no raised voice, no threats, just a closed circuit. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about precision. They fired the shot, I just let gravity finish the job. 4 weeks later, I walked into the Desert Mirage Conference Center wearing a navy blazer I didn't even own a month prior, with a badge that read, L. Monroe, Director Compliance, Navion Global. Funny how quickly a title change turned silence into applause. My phone buzzed with LinkedIn notifications before I'd even cleared the check-in desk. Apparently, Bellhaven's little breach had become industry lore, just not with my name attached. They'd buried it under confidential resolution, but whispers travel faster than memos. Navion didn't ask many questions during the hiring process. They saw the footage, saw the clause, knew what it meant to have someone who could build systems and know when to defend them. Their offer wasn't just generous, it was decisive. Private office, direct access to board meetings, and a 6-month signing bonus just to make sure I didn't answer calls from their competitors. But this panel, this was icing. "Welcome to Panel 2B, the moderator said, tapping the mic. "Today we're discussing hostile internal audits, chain of custody policies, and how outdated governance workflows can open the door to legal disaster." I smiled without smiling. The room was a sea of trade compliance managers, customs liaisons, and legal observers, all fidgeting in those awkward conference chairs that squeak every time someone shifts their weight. I scanned the crowd once before the panel began, more out of habit than anything. And there she was. Second row, left side, hair straighter, maybe darker, Valerie. She was in the audience, wearing a badge that just said consultant, no company listed. I didn't look away. I didn't need to. She saw me, froze, just a beat, then looked down at her conference packet like it had the answers she couldn't buy anymore. The panel kicked off. We each gave our intros, then moved into case studies. I kept it cool, clinical, talked about process safeguards, third-party attestation, and the importance of separating personal assumptions from professional evidence. Then the moderator queued up the final case study. A cautionary tale, he called it, pulling up a slide labeled Incident Alpha. No names, no companies, just bullet points. Manager initiates unauthorized internal search. No prior consent or legal documentation. Employee possesses contract clause, privacy breach trigger, clause enforced. Company pays 6-figure equity and severance penalty. NDA filed post-resolution. The moderator smiled politely. "Lisa, would you like to walk us through what might have happened here?" I didn't flinch. "Sure," I said, leaning forward. "This scenario is actually a textbook example of what happens when leadership mistakes control for compliance. The moment a manager prioritizes suspicion over procedure, they open the door for litigation, breach of contract, and public scrutiny. You can't unring that bell." I paused. Let the silence do its job. "And if the employee happens to be the architect of the compliance framework itself?" I added, letting my eyes scan the room, but not linger too long. "Well," I said, smiling faintly, "you get exactly what they earned." I didn't have to look directly at her to know she hadn't moved. Not one question from her, not one head tilt, not even a sip from her water bottle. Just stillness. The kind you only see when someone's trapped inside a memory they thought no one else remembered. But I remembered. The drawer, the pouch, the contract she pretended wasn't real. Now it was a slide in a seminar, a footnote in someone else's cautionary binder. Her story. My voice, 2 months to the day. That's how long it took from the moment she opened that drawer to the moment the final wire hit my account. I was sitting in a cafe across from Navion's downtown office, black coffee, no cream, no distractions, when the notification buzzed in. $306,000 cleared, verified. Broken down, it looked almost clinical on paper. $180,000 invested equity, $90,000 in breach penalties, $36,000 in non-compete offset. Now, what it meant, what it really meant, was something no spreadsheet could explain. That money didn't just buy silence, it bought vindication. It bought back every hour I kept my head down while she posed for credit in meetings I carried. Every time I bit my tongue while she butchered terms she didn't understand. Every smug smirk. Every passive-aggressive post-it. Navayan had given me a platform, a clean slate. They didn't want gossip, they wanted results. And they got them. I rebuilt their compliance architecture in under a month, mapped their vulnerabilities before the Q1 audit even started. They knew what they had in me, they never questioned it. Valerie? She vanished. No apology, no email, not even a LinkedIn view from a burner account. She just faded. Like her badge had been deactivated in more places than the office. But I didn't need an apology, because I had the footage, that freeze-frame moment when her face collapsed in on itself like a folding chair, right as she realized the clause was real, that she'd activated it with her own hands, that every drawer she yanked open was one step deeper into a trap I'd set 6 months earlier, with 3 backups and a signature from her own CTO. That image was my closure. She tore through my drawers like I was hiding something shameful, but everything she found belonged to me, signed, sealed, notarized. She thought she'd catch a thief. Instead, she gifted me 6 figures and a front row seat to her own professional disappearance. No yelling, no headlines, just gravity, and the weight of a contract she never bothered to read.